All right. Oh, great. So basically, just to go over what we'll cover overall in the webinar, we're going to talk about some of the benefits of social media and how we can use social media in our work as individual advocates and as PWM USA advocates and members and leaders. And we'll talk a little bit about what kinds of material can be shared, and also as part of this, look into a couple of past actions that PWN USA has taken on social media, just as examples. So you all know me. I'm going to let Erin just introduce herself a little bit before we get started.
Yeah, so as Olivia said, my name is Erin McKellen. I am currently consulting for PWN USA in all things communications, especially concerning social media and things that are on the web. So I have a lot of different experiences working as an advocate and an activist for various causes. A lot of my work has been based under the umbrella of feminism, and I have also started some of my own social media campaigns, and I'm just a very active social media enthusiast, and I do a lot of writing and consulting for a variety of different publications and organizations. You can check out my work at erinmckell.com, which is simply how my name is spelled with a .com at the end, if you want to learn more about me.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Erin. And as you all know, I'm Olivia. I'm the Communications Director here at Positive Women's Network USA. And I see some folks who are joining on the call who may have also been on the Twitter and social media webinar that we did last year. So this is really some of it is a review, but some of it is really a broadening. A lot of it is a broadening of our knowledge and of the topic and our use of social media. So we've covered the introductions, the learning objectives, and we're going to look at some best practices and look at, again, some examples from PWN USA's work and elsewhere. So since we've covered all the agenda, also one other thing, in addition to the recording, we also have a discussion box, a chat box, to the left side of your screen if you're on the webinar, so you can enter questions there. Everyone is muted except for the presenters right now. So if you would like to ask a question, you can enter it into the chat box. And then when we have gone through the full webinar, at the end, we'll have a few minutes and folks can come off mute if they want to ask questions, or we'll cover questions in the chat box, a little bit of both. And for the future, you'll hit *6 to unmute yourself, but we'll have a sort of question and answer unmuting part of the webinar later on. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Erin to start us off.
Fabulous. So, as you can see on our first slide, we're talking about Twitter. And Twitter is a really hard thing to summarize. It's interesting because it started out being a platform that asked people what they were doing. And if you actually were on Twitter, the little box where you type in your tweet, it would say, like, what are you doing? And you were kind of supposed to answer that question. But obviously now it's so much more than that, and people use it for so many different things. So very simply, it's an online social networking service where you can send and read really short messages called tweets. They're all 140 characters or less. And really the reason that people use Twitter is to share information in a way that's easy and accessible, because something really short and that's in a small little bite is going to reach people a lot easier sometimes than a long article or a blog post or even a video that's 3 or 4 minutes, when sometimes people want to get their information really quickly, which is the huge draw as to why people decide to use Twitter. And you can see we've put some screenshots of our own Twitter, PWN USA. You should definitely follow us. And some other advocates and some kind of examples of what a tweet looks like. As you can see, there's a lot that goes into it. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the anatomy. Next slide, please. So a quick anatomy lesson. If you're not versed in Twitter, you're not currently on Twitter, this will give you a little guide to knowing what all these little pieces and parts are. So a handle is the username that you have on Twitter. So it's how people can find you. It's what your little @ sign is. As you can see, like PWM USA, for example, ours is US PWN. So that's how people can find you and search for you, and that's how you're mentioned, is with your handle. And then speaking of mentions, a mention is when you put someone's handle into a tweet. So if you're talking about a specific person, like Melissa Harris Perry, for example, in this tweet, on the screenshot, as you can see, MHP show is Melissa Harris Perry. So when you're referring to Melissa Harris Perry, instead of just saying Melissa Harris Perry, if you put in the mention, it actually will show up in that news feed, in that person's notifications. So it's a great way to get someone to know you're talking about them, and also to direct people to the specific person that you're talking about. Now, a hashtag is simply just sort of a way to connect with people on an idea. That's kind of the most simple way I can explain it. So you can see there are some examples of hashtags, hashtag sexual violence, and the hashtag is the little number symbol. Hashtag SAM, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Hashtag Nerdland, which has to do with Melissa Harris Perry's show. So basically, it connects you to everyone else who's using that hashtag. So you can use Twitter to search for hashtags, and then you'll see a feed of everyone who's used that hashtag in a tweet. And so it's a really great way to connect with people on similar thoughts and ideas, or things that are happening in the world or in the culture, like Sexual Assault Awareness Month, for example. So that's what a hashtag is, very simply. So a link is simply when you insert a link to something into a tweet. A lot of times they're put into bit.ly or tiny URL forms because Twitter has such a short character limit. So putting the long links in a lot of times isn't too beneficial. And then finally, your actual message. So your message is actually what your tweet is composed of. So as I said, it has to be 140 characters or fewer as the total, and Twitter will not let you tweet your tweet if it is more than that. And usually that's about 2 or 3 sentences, depending on your sentence length. So you definitely have to be mindful about what you're saying, and to make sure that it's not something that is too long and isn't going to fit nicely into Twitter's parameters around characters. Next slide. So what exactly do people do on Twitter? This is a question that has a lot of different answers, and people use Twitter for different reasons. So some of those reasons are highlighted here. So especially if you are a public figure, a lot of times you're going to use your Twitter to tell your audience about things that are on your mind, things that you're doing currently, like if you're at an event or something like that, a conference, you can tell all your followers about what you're doing sort of day to day. A lot of celebrities do this sort of thing. So it's a more casual sort of way to talk to people that are following you. Also, talking about current cultural interests or events. Sexual Assault Awareness Month would be an example of that. So talking about something that's happening right now and that a lot of people are probably tuned into. So a lot of people use it as sort of a soapbox. To connect with like-minded people, and this is a really important one because Twitter can be a really great networking tool, actually. You can find people who have similar interests, who are in similar professions, who are interested in similar activities, who have the same hobbies as you, who have the same political views. So you can really connect with people, and a lot of people use it actually to build their network and to connect with other people who share their views. Also, Twitter a lot of times is used to either criticize or uplift people in the public eye. So a lot of times people will use Twitter to talk about celebrities or pop culture and to talk about people who are kind of in the news or are very popular. And it's a very great hotspot, actually, to do this because a lot of people use Twitter to talk about their views on public figures who are controversial. And then also you can share information. Lots of people share interesting articles or videos or information that they think is relevant and that they really enjoyed and want to share with other people. Then also self-promotion. I think self-promotion sometimes has this negative connotation to it, but it really doesn't have to. You know, we all want to uplift ourselves and to share our work with other people. And it's a great way to do that because people who are following you probably have some kind of interest in you as a person, even if you don't necessarily know them. They're probably interested in what you have to say. So sharing blog posts that you write or sharing any sort of work that you're doing as an activist or with organizations or really anything, Twitter is a really good place in order to do that and in order to share the content that you're creating with other folks. And if you're like, I want to create content but I don't know what to do, we're going to be talking about that as well. And then finally, sharing interesting things. Like I said, so sharing articles, photos, videos, etc., that people have found interesting or want to engage their audience about. A lot of times people will ask a question to their audience, like, what do you think about this? Or what are your thoughts on this piece? Like, that's a very common thing to do on Twitter. Next slide. So what exactly do advocates do on Twitter? That's a whole other question. So probably all of us consider ourselves to be advocates in some way. And so advocates really can use Twitter to their advantage. And Twitter can be a really great platform to use in order to engage in activism or in advocacy work. And a lot of activists and advocates already are doing this. And one of the great things about Twitter is that it's really easy to organize. It's really easy to find other people who are doing activism around the same issues as you are and to be able to talk to each other and engage and work on projects together. And it's really easy to really organize with everyone on every level. So activists who are working alongside you, as well as organizations that you might want to connect to and work further with. And even the general public, you know, getting your messages out and being able to organize just around the general population. And with that, too, you can use it in order to strategize. You can kind of use Twitter as almost sort of like a focus group. You can talk about ideas. You can share your knowledge and discuss things that are going on. A lot of people use Twitter in order to discuss their ideas, and they'll even do, like, series of tweets. So, like, part 1, part 2, part 3, and, like, divide their tweets because if they have a lot to say, and they'll connect them back to each other. And hashtags are another great way to do that because it connects all your tweets together. So you could start a hashtag in order to connect your ideas about a topic. But it's a really great way to connect with other people and talk about your ideas and really come up with strategies. And then Spotify. So I love the word Spotify, but you can identify, you know, things that are hot button issues, things that people are really passionate about and really engaged in. And because those issues usually are kind of where people are, and meeting people where they're at is a very effective way to advocate, and probably all of you know that. So it's very easy on Twitter to see what's trending. Even on the side of your home screen, it will show you the top trends in your country and even in the world. And you can click on that hashtag or onto that topic and see what people are saying, and kind of see what are the issues and events that people are talking about and really care about, and how can I tap into that as an advocate. And then finally, Twitter's really a space you can share and support. So obviously, like I've already said, you can share your work, and it is a great place to do that. But you can also support others, because Twitter does sort of have an online harassment problem, which is actually kind of being worked on with some feminist activists. Women Action in the Media, whose executive director is Jamia Wilson, she's doing some work with Twitter, actually, in order to develop some tools for people who are being harassed online. But it's a lot of people have actually used it in order to combat that sort of harassment and to engage each other and support other people who are sort of going through some sort of harassment, or even people who are just sort of going through like a hard time. It's a really good place to kind of reach out to someone. And then some examples of some ways you can do this that are practical include like Twitter chats. And we're going to talk about those a little bit more in depth. But an example of something from my work specifically around that is Back to Sex Ed. That was a tweet chat I hosted when I was a consultant for an organization called BACHI, which stands for Bay Area Communities for Health Education. And they focus on like sexuality education, specifically for younger students. And so we hosted, I sort of cultivated a Twitter chat, and you can see on the graphic in the left-hand corner, those are some of the logos of the organizations who participated. And then we used the hashtag, and we all kind of talked about our ideas in order to empower students to get accurate sex ed information. And we did it right before the start of the school year. And then YCH Live, that is an annual conference hosted by YCH, which stands for Youth Tech Health, and that's an organization I also work for. And so at their annual conference, which actually just happened, what they do is they host a conference-wide Twitter party. So all conference long, people use the hashtag YCH Live to talk about the sessions they're going to network with each other, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's really cool because you can kind of see the conference as it's happening, but then also look back and, really make those connections. And it's a really cool way to engage around the content that you're seeing and engaging with, since the conference can be a lot of information that's kind of thrown at you, and you might want to talk about it. All right, and I think now I'm going to turn it back over to Olivia.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for breaking down some of those really, really key points, Erin. So just jumping right off of what you were saying in terms of using hashtags on Twitter as an advocate, again, when you use that little number sign and then put that little term right in front of it, then it becomes a link. When you click on that, you can see all other folks' messages and tweets about that particular topic. And one example that's really recent that a lot of PWNers took advantage of and used was National Women and Girls HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, or I don't even know how you would say that acronym, NWGAAD, NWGHAAD. Since I know that a lot of PWN USA members were involved in the Twitter storm that we were part of around National Women and Girls Day, just as a refresher, it was in response to the fact that the White House had convened an event on the connections between violence and trauma and women living with HIV without actually inviting any women living with HIV to be part of the planning or the execution of the event. So a lot of people were very outraged about that. We tweeted at the White House using the @ White House, for those who remember, and we use the National Women and Girls Day hashtag, that's at NWGHAAD1, and also Without Us, hashtag Without Us. You can see they're a little small, but if you take a look at these images, you can see some examples of messages and thoughts and content and just really just a sense of outrage that people were sharing on this particular hashtag, and how you're able to look at all of those tweets in a thread like that, all of those little 140 character or less messages like that all at once, everyone's different ones, is by basically searching on Twitter or clicking on a tweet, that little hashtag, because it becomes a link and you can see all those tweets together. And our hashtag, PWM Speaks, which Barb, thank you so much for mentioning it in the chat box, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, was used on National Women and Girls Day over 200 times on Twitter by many PWN USA members and allies and partners, and we were really able to spread the word not only about what was going on at the White House, and when our own Vanessa Johnson, National Training and Leadership Director, who was asked a little bit before the event to come and speak at the event. We were able to communicate together as we were watching it, streaming, which was really sort of uplifting, sort of end to the storm. We still had the same sentiments to share with the White House, but it was really amazing to see Vanessa give her comments there as well on the video. So just wanted to give just as an example, a couple of this and other actions that PWM USA members, allies, partners, and others have sort of taken part in together, spearheaded by PWM USA. Another one, looking back into our recent past, was the Day of Action to End Violence Against Women Living with HIV, which I know that a lot of folks who are on the webinar now were part of at the time. That was October 23rd of last year. And it was the first ever Day of Action of its kind, and there were ruckus raisings. There was one in Colorado and other actions in person, and there was a lot of activity on social media as well. People sharing messages about the link between violence and trauma in the lives of women, violence and trauma and HIV in the lives of women, and really sharing solutions such as, for instance, trauma-informed care, sharing experiences. People wrote to a flash blog, which the amazing Morenike Onaiwu and Advocacy Without Borders brought folks to write for that day. There were just really a lot of ways to engage, and a lot of them were shared on Twitter. So just sharing a couple of the tweets from the hashtag EndVAWHIV from that day. And again, we had 20 official endorsers, but dozens more individuals and dozens more organizations shared the messaging. Like, if you look at the way bottom of that image of those tweets, NARAL Pro-Choice North Carolina shared messaging from the Day of Action, and they're a big organization in North Carolina around reproductive rights, and they weren't even an official endorser. They just got the word and were felt connected to the topic and shared the messaging. So it's a really powerful tool that we've used in different ways. And actually, this goes back to something that Erin was just mentioning, and it even goes back to what Barb mentioned in the chat box, which is if folks are on Twitter and they're on this webinar and feel inspired, they can use the hashtag PWM Speaks, which is PWM USA's kind of advocacy hashtag, to tweet about their involvement in this event, this webinar. But we have definitely, folks will sort of make a Twitter action out of lots of different events, like, for instance, AIDS Watch, which happened in D.C. a couple of weeks ago. There's an example tweet from there using that hashtag AIDS Watch. People often will tweet from events and follow the hashtag of that specific event to sort of have, it's a kind of like one big, long kind of Twitter event that you sort of may be taking part in person, but also there's another way to engage in it, which is through Twitter and online, using hashtags. Again, as Erin really explained really clearly. So there's that tweet from AIDS Watch, and also another tweet from a training in Texas, actually, at the AFIA Center in Texas, that someone was tweeting a couple of months ago from that event. So really, any event where it's allowed, basically, to share information, as long as it's not a private event of some kind, it's sort of any event can become an occasion to share thoughts and share perspectives on Twitter, if you so choose. So I just wanted to share a couple of examples there. A lot of folks have asked about sort of the nuts and bolts of setting up an account. It's basically, I laid out some of these steps there. I think that some people often feel a little stressed out about what their Twitter handle or name, Twitter username. Again, as Erin said, that's the stuff that comes after the @ and it's how you're known on Twitter. Don't be too stressed out about what it should be. I mean, once you've started the account, you can't change it. It will stay that way. But, you can keep it simple. It should be something that's not too hard to remember for you or anyone else. It can be related to your name. It can even be an email address that you use. Like, for instance, mine is O_G_FORD, my personal Twitter. That's an email address I don't use anymore, but it's definitely It's definitely a name that I'll always remember. And sometimes people use numbers that they find easy to remember, but as long as it's not too hard for others or yourself, but actually mostly others, to be able to use, so that they can mention you in their tweets and they can follow you, as we'll talk about a little bit later too. So yeah, just pick out your handle, pick out what your Twitter name is going to be, and then just go to twitter.com. Just click on, there's a button that says Get Started. They sometimes change their homepage, but that part shouldn't change very often. There should be some link that says, Get Started. Enter your information like you would if you were setting up an email address. Choose an easy password that you can remember. Get to sign up, and then you've got an account. You've got a Twitter account. You have a presence, and you can use it as an individual, as an advocate. You can use it to take part in all different actions and activities on Twitter, or just share about your own thoughts about different topics. You can even we're really talking a lot about advocacy, but there are also, and advocacy is exciting and fun in itself. There's also, you can, if you are watching a movie or a sporting event or something like that, you can tweet your thoughts about that as well. We won't focus too much on Twitter for that purpose, but it's definitely a way to use it. And this is your space once you set up a Twitter account. So you're welcome to use it as you like, as you want to, as you come up with things that you want to share with a wider audience, both your followers and people that may want to follow you to come. So I'm going to turn it over to back over to Erin now for a few minutes.
So some things you might want to think about before you actually start tweeting, because I know how exciting it can be to send out your first tweet and to really just jump into that. I think it's definitely important to be a little bit mindful and think about what you actually want to get out of Twitter and your experience as a tweeter. So why you should be on social media, it's really up to you. And I would ask you to ask yourself that question. Are you trying to engage in activist work? Are you trying to build your network of advocates and of other activists? Are you trying to simply share messages and share information and use it as an educational tool? Really ask yourself what you're using it for, and then sort of make sure that your tweets and your content align with your sort of personal social media mission. And then using different social media accounts, you definitely want to approach your social media use differently on different accounts, because how you use Twitter and how you use Facebook and how you use Instagram, that's all going to differ vastly. And definitely for Twitter, it's a great place to share things that are very short and sweet and to the point. You don't want to be going on super long rampages or laments about something. And there are other great social media platforms for that, and I think Facebook is probably one for that. But you definitely want to be mindful of your audience and where you are. And then also creating a strong presence. So being the most yourself that you can. So asking yourself, what are your positive qualities? What are the things that people compliment you on the most? And making those at the forefront of your presence. So if you're somebody who's a very strong leader and you're constantly being told that you have great leadership qualities, you should use Twitter as a leader and talk about things as a leader would, and kind of be at the forefront of the action and what's going on. So figuring out kind of what your strengths are and then playing to those are going to create a really strong presence for you and make you stick out amongst other people. And then also having a really consistent individual brand message. So if you're somebody who markets yourself as a leader, we'll continue to use that example, you're probably not going to want to tweet out things that are just sort of random thoughts or things in your personal life. That's not going to really align well with presenting yourself as somebody who is an outspoken leader and who is changing the culture. And, you might personally disagree with that, but people will perceive you as sort of confused and not really understand why you're tweeting things that don't really align with the presence you've created for yourself. So you definitely want to be careful about that and be consistent. And then also be yourself. You don't want to put on a show or act like what you think you're supposed to be like on social media. Definitely being yourself is going to get you the farthest, for sure, on any social media platform for that matter, not just Twitter. Next slide. So now we're going to talk a little bit about content creation. I know I touched on it a little bit. So if you are searching and you want to create things, if you are a very creative person, what can you really share? And there's a lot of options, actually. And I would definitely encourage you to try all of them and kind of see what works for you, because usually you can get a sense based on the engagement that you're getting whether or not something is resonating with your audience. So a few examples are blog entries. So if you have a blog, or you can always create one, you can write blog posts and then, share them on Twitter and kind of ask, your audience questions about them, or find creative ways to engage and see what other people have to say about the topic that you're passionate about talking about. Then also images. People share a lot of pictures and also GIFs, which are sort of little moving pictures. I'm sure you've seen those before. It's called GIF, actually. And lots of people share those on Twitter and other social media platforms. Videos are always really good to share on Twitter. People love to see really relevant video content. And just your kind of general thoughts. Your tweets are actually a creation, even though you probably don't think of it that way. But, your thoughts on advocacy, your thoughts on life, your thoughts on anything, really. And if you find yourself really liking talking in tweets, so to speak, I would definitely encourage you, to keep doing that, because you might be really good at coming up with short messages that really are proving to be engaging with others. And then other interesting stuff and others articles. So really anything can be a piece of content. Like I said, even a tweet, that's a piece of content, even though you don't probably think of it as such. But, sharing anything that you see and you think is interesting, it's probably going to be worth sharing with your audience. And then, others' articles and others' work, that's always a great way to not only share interesting content or content that you think is important, but you can also engage with that individual. If that's somebody who you would like to maybe form a partnership with, or simply talk to further about their ideas, you can mention them in your tweet, and then they'll see it on their profile, and then, if they want to engage with you, they can do that. And it's a great way to kind of open that door. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about memes, because memes are a really popular way of creating content, and they're also very easy to do. So what is a meme? You can see there's a couple of examples. The Ryan Gosling meme at the top actually was such a popular blog. This woman had a whole blog full of those that it was actually turned into a physical book of Ryan Gosling feminist memes. So you could definitely see there's an example of the power of the meme. So a meme is interesting because the actual definition is a piece of cultural information that's passed down non-genetically. So it's literally just a piece of, interesting, right? Interesting definition. So it's basically something that's relevant that people can get really easily and that's shared with others. So it's pretty simple. And then obviously, like on the internet, because memes can be of other types if you're talking like anthropologically, but on the internet, it's some sort of image and then with text on it. And the text is usually in some way related or kind of relates to sort of a cultural joke or something popular, like Ryan Gosling, and the sort of Ryan Gosling is a feminist. That's kind of a really popular thing that people in the feminist community instantly know about. And it's great because you have that instant education already built in. You don't have to educate people about what your content is because it hits that like relevant cultural idea. So that's basically what a meme is. And if you want to create some memes, and I would encourage you even just for fun, you can play around with them. So meme generator, that's a great one. If you just Google meme generator, it will come up. Memecreator.org is another one you can use to create memes. And if you want to get really fancy, you can actually create your own from scratch and use something like Photoshop or a photo editor in order to do this. A tool that I really like is called Picasa, which is Google's photo editor. It's a really great tool, and it's simple, but you can do interesting things on it because you can take a picture and add text to it in different fonts, for example, on Picasa. So that's a meme. So, you can really easily make it yourself. And sometimes it's a little bit better quality if you do that. So definitely I would encourage you to play around with creating memes because they can be really great ways to connect with people. Next slide. So infographics. So infographics are basically some sort of graphic that is conveying data or information. And you can see what makes a good infographic is laid out as an infographic appropriately. And so it's a mix of having data, so having some sort of statistics or some kind of scientific or empirical data in there is sort of a requirement in order for it to be informational. Having design, so having it look really nice and clean, you definitely want to use a more professional photo editor for this sort of thing. Shareability, so it should be something that, again, hits sort of a really relevant cultural idea or event that people are talking about. And a story, a great infographic tells a story. So it might go from like top to bottom. You'll see a lot of times really big infographics that you start at the top and it will start with a really interesting idea and sort of flow along so that when you get to the bottom, the whole thing together paints a picture instead of just having this one little idea. And that's the really great part of an infographic is you can tell a story visually. And so some great tools to create infographics. PictoChart, that's something I really like. It's a website, actually, and you can create free infographics, and it's very, very, very easy to use. And it makes creating infographics very easy. And the quality of the infographics is also very stellar for a free tool and for a website like this. You can also use a website called infogr.am, so it's like infograms. Canva, that's another tool. And then Photoshop or any photo editor, really, you can use to create infographics. And there are tons of tutorials, especially on YouTube, if you search, that you can find if you want to learn how to use a more professional, so to speak, photo editor. Next slide. So Twitter is a great way.
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay. So
we can take. Yeah, please. You can start off, and I'll add in a little bit. But please go for it.
Great. So as I mentioned, Twitter is a great way to connect with other people, and it's a great way to find similarities and common connections. And so here are some ways that you can kind of do that in a more strategic sense instead of just tweeting at someone, for example. These are sort of going a little bit beyond in terms of engagement and going to that sort of higher level. So the first example are Twitter chats / Twitter storms, and we have a whole sort of example on the next slide for you. So a Twitter chat is basically when a group of people or even just one person decides to organize an event on Twitter. It takes place at a certain date and time, and then you use one hashtag. And so you agree to use any specific hashtag, like, for example, you could say like PWM Speaks. We're going to tweet about this topic and use PWM Speaks as the hashtag, and then everyone sort of gathers at this date and time and tweets with this hashtag. And so it's a great way to uplift and hashtag or get more engagement, and then also find other people who are engaging around similar issues as you are. And then Twitter teach-ins, so that's something really interesting. So essentially, like using Twitter like as a little teach-in tool. So having like kind of a set day and time again, or you don't even have to, but and to talk about something and to share educational information. And you can even start a whole separate Twitter account that's, based on sharing information around, X topic, and that's kind of what you use it for as a teaching tool. And then everyday mentions are definitely, should be uplifted and encourage you to mention people and to engage with as many people as you can. And the power of the mention definitely should not be underestimated. And then engaging with other organizations, advocates, talking to people that you find interesting, telling someone, good job, even if you read an article they like, and just kind of saying kudos, I like what you had to say. I know I feel really good when people do that for me, so definitely I would encourage you to do it. Cross-promotion of accounts. So if there's an account you really like, you can feel free to say, hey, everybody should follow this person because they're tweeting all of this great content about X. And a lot of people really appreciate that. And it's also a good way to connect you to that person and then also send them a bunch of followers because, that definitely is a good way to kind of get in the door with somebody. And FF shout-outs, which FF stands for Follow Friday. It's kind of a common thing that people do and people understand what it means. And so on Fridays, people will put the FF hashtag out and then put people that you should follow, so Follow Friday. So you could say like FF to amazing advocates for women living with HIV and then mention like 3 or 4 different organizations who are doing that. And then usually those people will retweet you or, say thank you for shouting them out. And it's a great way to just kind of share people that you think are interesting and that you want your audience to engage with. And then even just simple, this is probably the simplest way you can engage, is to retweet. So there's literally a button, and it kind of looks like a little square with arrows. And if you press it, it will retweet it, a tweet. So what that does is take someone's tweet and it literally puts it onto your timeline. And then your audience can see who you retweeted. And then emceeing, which is modified retweeting. So it's taking a retweet or a tweet of someone's and then modifying it in some way. And then quote tweeting, which there's now a button. You can do that on Twitter, which it basically puts the person's tweet in quotes, and then you can add something at the end if you want to make a comment that goes beyond what that person said. And then it also makes it an original tweet on your account instead of a retweet. So, Olivia, were you going to say something?
You covered it quite well. No, I also just wanted to give a little stay tuned because we'll be sharing again the date and the time of a Twitter chat that PWM will be co-hosting next week, and also just to reiterate just that those mentions are the way, those everyday kind of at mentions are the way that folks kind of communicate and connect with one another. It's sort of like a starting point of nudging folks and connecting and making friends or making allies also on Twitter. Because again, just to rehash, I know that you said this already, Erin, earlier on, but I know that some folks have just come on. When you put somebody else's at their handle, whatever that little at, and then their kind of little nickname, basically their Twitter name, when you put that in one of your tweets, they see that you mentioned them. So it's exciting when you first start to get folks mentioning you, and it's a thrill when people see that you've mentioned them for whatever reason. Well, sometimes it can be, if it's the White House, for instance, like we were at mentioning the White House, I'm sure that, because we were being critical, they weren't necessarily thinking, thank you so much, but in the spirit of engagement, I'm sure they were happy to have us tweet and mention them. But it is a way to, it's that way to be recognized by others and to communicate with others, because then they can respond if it's something that you're mentioning that you want their feedback on or you want to get a response around. So yeah, I just wanted to add in that little point. But thank you so much, Erin.
Great. Yeah, no problem. All right, so we're ready for the next slide.
Sure.
All right, so Twitter chats, as I said, we're going to be talking about this. So a Twitter chat, it is kind of complicated and simple at the same time. You really come up with a concept or something that you want to talk about specifically and a hashtag for it. And then you pair up with other organizations, advocates, ideally people who have a good, strong Twitter presence already and who might already have a lot of followers or more followers than you do, because that will make sure that your tweets and your Twitter chat are going to be seen by more people, obviously. So it's going to heighten your chances of engagement. And then you similarly pick a date and a time, and then you would create informational graphics. So just something really simple, like I showed the Back to Sex Ed example that I did, something really simple that just kind of gives people the information about the Twitter chat. You can write blog posts about it even. to promote it if you're a writer. And then promote. A lot of Twitter chats are all about promotion and just spreading the word that this is something that you're doing. And you definitely want to focus on that because you want people to show up and tweet. And then something really good to do is to pre-write your tweets before the Twitter chat. And this might seem kind of inauthentic, but a lot of times you'll see a million tweets coming at you, and you can't possibly respond to all of them, and you're trying to also send your own tweets out while also engaging with other people who are tweeting in your Twitter chat. And so it's a lot of action happening at once. And so if you can just copy and paste the tweets that you already have written, it makes your life a lot easier, and then you can focus on engaging other folks instead of thinking of tweets to write, because that can take a lot of time and effort in and of itself, and to try to do both is really difficult. And then finally, conducting the chat at the set hour. Everybody gets on their Twitter, use the hashtag, and you tweet. And so it's simple. Like I said, if you follow this formula, you should have no problem. But it definitely takes a few times, I think, to really get down the execution, and you'll kind of learn as you go about what to expect. And it's basically just being really fast and being able to engage with as many people as possible. Next slide. The Twitter tools. So if you want to take your Twitter to the next level, you might want to look at your analytics to see how people are engaging with you, how you're doing. Or also possibly scheduling out tweets. I know some individuals who do this who are more sort of in my realm of like professional bloggers and people who sort of do social media for a living. But it can be helpful if there's if you see like 3 great articles in the span of an hour and you want to share all of them, but you think it might be a little bit much for your audience to see 3 different tweets from you in the span of an hour. What you can do is use a scheduling service like Hootsuite or Buffer, for example. Those are 2 really great ones, to schedule your tweets. So then you can share all of your posts, but you can schedule them out so that they're not all at once, and then there's no activity. And then you've got 2 tweets in the span of a couple hours, and then you didn't tweet for 3 days. And obviously that happens to everybody, but sometimes if you want to, especially if you're trying to create more of a professional presence, having scheduled tweets and having like really consistent engagement can help you to keep and cultivate new followers. Because if you don't tweet for a while, sometimes people unfollow you and just think you kind of fell off the face of the planet. So definitely I would encourage you to check out TweetReach or Twitter Analytics. Twitter has its own analytics tool called Twitter Analytics if you want to check out how you're doing. And then also Hootsuite and Buffer if you want to schedule some tweets. And I believe you can get free accounts of both of those. Next slide. And, okay, no, this is to my side. Okay. Social media can so easily overtake your life. We hear a lot about social media addiction and people just not being able to get off their phones for even a half an hour. And we've probably all been there before. So it's definitely important to have some kind of a balance and, to not constantly be on social media. And so here are some of the tips that we've come up with to help you create that balance in your life. So realizing that you don't have to be on social media, you don't have to tweet, you don't have to be on Facebook if you're an individual. So as an organization, or if you're part of an organization, you probably are going to have to do that. But if you're your own person, you don't have to have those individual accounts. It's totally fine if that's not something that you want to do. You should definitely put your own self-care first. And then less is more. So everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people think that they have to be on every single platform in existence. And you do not need to do that. Actually, picking 1 or 2 that you really focus on will give you better results than spreading yourself too thin over 10 different platforms. So pick the ones that work for you. You can even try a bunch and then, just get rid of your account if you're not happy with it. And stick to those and really focus on building those instead of being on 12 different platforms. And as Olivia said, we probably are going to go a few minutes over. I know we also started a few minutes late to get folks a chance to come in because this was at a transitional time of the day. So just a heads up, if you have to leave, we're recording the call. So you can view all of the content at your leisure. So getting back to the list, the third tip is to get organized and make a schedule. I know I talked about scheduling services like Hootsuite and Buffer, but you can even have your own sort of internal schedule. So saying, you're going to post 1 time a day or post 2 times a day. And then, you can adjust this. You kind of get audience feedback, because if you're seeing like, 5 people unfollowed me and I haven't tweeted in 3 days, that probably means you need to tweet a little bit more. So you can kind of get a sense of what that sweet spot is when you sort of look at how you're doing and how your engagement is happening and what times of the day it happens the most at. And that's why analytics tools can be great to kind of give you that information. And then also, once you get going with several platforms, consider using a social media management tool, because something like Hootsuite, it allows you to manage several different platforms on one website. So, you can do Twitter, Facebook, all of those different things on Hootsuite, and you don't have to have like separate management accounts in order to do that. So definitely, take those tips for what you will, but I think definitely, not letting it overtake your life and putting your own needs and your own self-care first before social media is kind of definitely the overarching theme here. Next slide. So using and creating hashtags. We've talked a lot about hashtags. So if you want to create a hashtag, if there's something you want to talk about or you're going to conduct a Twitter chat and you need to create a hashtag, here's kind of your simple little how-to guide as to how to do that. So making a hashtag really short and easy to understand, that's going to be critical, because people are going to easily be able to find it and then also engage with you and understand what you're saying. If a hashtag is very complicated and something that most people don't have any idea about, people are not going to use your hashtag because they're not going to really understand what you're tweeting about or what you're talking about. So if it's something that's really short and easy, you're probably going to get more people engaged with it than if you make it very complicated. So definitely short and easy is the way to go. And then making it tied to a relevant cultural issue or within your organization if you have one. Definitely important, making it something that is kind of hitting one of those hot buttons. And it's something that is used frequently. So you can even kind of study popular hashtags and see what are they doing really well and what are words and symbols that people are frequently using, and sort of make those a part of your hashtag. And then you definitely use tools and metrics designed around hashtags. You can use stuff like Twitter Analytics to get metrics on your hashtag and see how many people tweeted it, what your reach is, and things like that. So definitely doing that to kind of see how your hashtag is doing. And then engaging also with current trending hashtags. You can put more than one hashtag into your tweet. So if there's a popular hashtag, you can put your hashtag alongside of it so that it will show up in both feeds. So people that are already looking at this really popular hashtag, then they're going to see your hashtag and probably go and check it out. And it's a really easy way to get people who are already tweeting about this issue over to your hashtag and sort of play off of a trend that's already happening. And then finally, adding your hashtag to those that are related, people that are popular, finding some way to get into the hashtags and the things that people are already talking about, and to see how you can get in there without having to build a complete audience for your hashtag from scratch. And with that, I think I am turning it back over to Olivia.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Erin. Actually, that example that you just gave around using more than one hashtag, in a given tweet is a really good example for introducing to those who don't know and reminding folks who do know about PWM Speaks, which is a hashtag. Actually, the idea for PWM Speaks and the actual text, this little term, PWM Speaks, actually came out of a conversation that I had long ago when I first started this job with Barb, who's on the call, so this is exciting, godmother of PWM Speaks, to have you on. But that's Barb Cardone, who's the board chair of PWM USA and longtime member. We use PWM Speaks for all sorts of different advocacy moments, big and small, that PWNers or allies to PWNers who are witnessing our work want to sort of use and tag with PWM Speaks, but we can also use it alongside other hashtags that are in use. Like, for instance, the upcoming National Women's Health Week. That's going to be next week. It starts on Mother's Day and runs through that whole week. We'll have some messaging that we started talking about on the SCAT call to share around that week. That'll be sort of part of the theme of our Twitter chat. Basically, we can use, when space allows, if you use PWN Speaks next to the hashtag, say, for National Women's Health Week, which is NWHW, little number sign and then NWHW, that connects our conversation and our sort of comment into the national conversation around National Women's Health Week. And can let folks know what PWN Speaks is doing, because they may, again, click on that link and say, well, what is PWN Speaks? What is this? And they'll see all the tweets from PWNers and allies and folks who are tweeting about the health needs of women living with HIV and health advocacy for women living with HIV. So definitely PWN Speaks is yours to use. It doesn't have to just be around a Twitter chat. If you're starting out on Twitter and want to, and you're naming an aspect of your advocacy, or you're sharing an article you think is really relevant to women living with HIV, you can use that hashtag, PWN Speaks. If you go to PWN's website, there's a wee tiny little widget on the right side, a widget, kind of a little bubble with text in it from Twitter. And what streams there is any tweet that uses PWN Speaks. So it's not everything that PWN USA, our handle, does. It's anything that comes through that uses the PWN Speaks hashtag. So just a little intro to that. I'm not going to go through all of these specifically. These are just a few sort of key entities to potentially follow as part of your own sort of getting started on Twitter. Of course, USPWN, which is PWN USA's Twitter handle, is at the top. But this is a nice kind of mix of advocates and HIV publications like thebody.com and AIDS Meds and other sort of overall women's publications and advocates and some just really great feminist activity, anti-violence organizations. Just a couple of suggestions, but you'll have more. You can start searching organizations that you admire. You can start searching for individuals and advocates that you know about and following them. Just click the little follow bubble, the follow button on their profiles. I'm going to move it along because I know that we're a little bit over time and I want to have a couple of minutes to address a couple of questions that have come through. We've really sort of come in touch on some of these questions throughout the whole webinar, but just really thinking about what your goals are for being on social media, for being on Twitter. And we'll have one quick sort of rundown of some other platforms. So this hour was really to focus on Twitter for advocacy, thinking about those resources, what images, what blog entries, what different kinds of content you want to share, what do you want to put out to the wider world on social media. So just questions to ask yourself. I'm going to turn it back over to Erin to talk a little bit about some other platforms. Then we'll do our Twitter challenge and take a couple of minutes for questions.
Great. So if you're looking for some other social media platforms to follow or to try out and see if you like them, and that can also be really great for advocacy, are as follows. So Facebook, you can create a profile or a professional page if you are someone who uses social media as a professional in whatever way. I would definitely encourage you to create your own professional page, and it allows you to engage with your audience as a Facebook page rather than a profile. Instagram, that is a really popular social media platform right now, especially with younger folks if you work with youth. It's great for sharing photos and videos, and that's basically what Instagram is comprised of, is all photos and short videos that are 15 seconds or less. And if you're really creative, if you're really visual, and you communicate best visually, I would definitely encourage you to check out Instagram. Tumblr is sort of an alternative blogging platform. It's actually technically a microblogging platform, and it allows you to share content but also create your own content, and it really is very diverse. There's lots of images and infographics and memes that do really well on Tumblr, but also actual literal text blog posts do well there as well. And I know I use my own Tumblr for both. And so that's a really great platform if you're more of an in-depth blogger. And then Snapchat is another really kind of new hot one. And the whole thing, again, is short videos and photos. And the interesting thing about Snapchat is it disappears after 10 seconds, so you can't, like, go back and look up the photos and videos that you've seen. So it has its good and its bad points. It's also really popular with young people. And it's kind of a unique way to share things that are happening in real time in your life. So those are some other platforms that you might want to look into or check out if you haven't already.
Beautiful. So I'm going to start taking us home by issuing some Twitter challenges for the next few weeks. I put in the date of the next Strategic Communications Action Team meeting, which will be May 28th, as kind of a goal, but this can be really for the next for the next month or a couple of months, however much time you individually need to sort of start to get more comfortable with Twitter and sort of come on. And of course, you're always welcome to drop me an email if you have questions or anything like that, or give me a call. We're here as a resource and technical support for this kind of thing. But basically, if you've got that Twitter account, go brush it off, visit it. Start one. If I challenge those who are curious about Twitter to jump in and just try it. As Janet Kitchen, actually, thank you so much for mentioning this. Some people learn by doing. So we could go to 100 webinars about Twitter and still kind of be like, well, what the heck is it? You may need to sort of set up that account and try it yourself. You can also just watch, basically. You can kind of be a little bit of a spectator before you start tweeting, but you can start following people, follow organizations, entities. The challenge is to follow at least 5, search some ones that you admire, or you can use the ones that are listed here. You'll get the slides later, and just see what they're up to, see what kinds of things they're tweeting. You can just kind of watch. No one knows you're watching if you're just if you're just looking at people's tweets, looking at their feeds, looking at their accounts. And just see what's going on over there. Or if you're feeling ready, you can just try tweeting. If you've got an account or you've set up an account, just try sending like 1 tweet a week. Maybe you can even retweet something. Just hit that retweet button and send out an article you like. Tweet a thought. And also another way that's going to be great practice, you can think of it as practice, is to just jump in and join PWM USA's Twitter chat. Which will dates on the next slide, but it'll be May 14th. It's going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific time, which is 4 p.m. Eastern. We are co-hosting with National Women's Health Network, which is a great women's advocacy organization in D.C. So they'll be our sort of Twitter co-host. And it'll be on women's HIV health advocacy. And it's a great way to just see basically to see what is sort of a high energy way to sort of get involved in Twitter. You don't necessarily have to send a tweet as part of the Twitter chat, but it's a nice way to sort of see how tweets flow in a Twitter chat. If you follow that hashtag, click on that little hashtag link. We'll be using NWHW for National Women's Health Week and also Women and HIV. So if you click on it, you'll see all of our tweets coming up for that hour. And just also remember, you're not alone. There, you have comrades, you have friends on Twitter, you've got allies, you've got sister advocates. You are definitely not alone on Twitter, and it's a great way to connect with people as well in a different kind of a way through this platform. So again, just another shout out. More information to come on the Twitter chat coming up late next week. And without further ado, thank you so much. Go forth and tweet. Take the Twitter challenge. Erin, do you have any final thoughts before we open it up for any questions from the participants?
No, I just want to thank everyone for being here, and I'm excited to answer questions. Excellent.
Thank you so much. I see there have been a couple of questions asked and answered in the chat box. One was about followers, seeing your followers' tweets. You don't see the people who follow you. You won't see their tweets on your feed unless you follow them back. So that's a sort of a key rule of thumb. If you want to see the tweets if you want them to show up in your own Twitter feed, so it'll come to your feed as opposed to your having to go to their Twitter account, their Twitter page to see what they're tweeting, you have to follow them. And Barb asked a really important question about confidentiality. And Erin, I wonder if you'd start by talking about that if you have any thoughts, and I can build off of it too. But what personal rule do you use to protect people's confidentiality? I'm open about my status, but I know many people are afraid to engage for fear of disclosure. Do you have any thoughts about that, Erin?
Yeah, I saw that question, and I thought that is such a great question, and I'm not even sure it's something I fully have the answer to, or even just kind of the general public has an answer to. I think confidentiality is still kind of something on social media that we're figuring out how to cultivate. So what I generally do in order to protect people's confidentiality is, one, I don't share other people's personal information at all. Even if it's so things people have told me, conversations I've had, I don't share that stuff on social media, and it's probably a good rule of thumb, to not share things that have to do with other people, and focus that on yourself and your own work that you're doing, and also in terms of like people's accounts and things like that. I will definitely, shout people out, and we talked a lot about mentioning and that sort of thing, but again, only in a context that is productive and conducive to sort of what they're doing on Twitter. So, I'm not going to talk about somebody's personal information unless that's something they've told me that they want me to tell the world, which doesn't really happen very often. I talk about someone, with respect and, try to engage them on the level that they're engaging with others with. So if somebody's not talking about, let's say, their relationship status, for example, if that's not something that they're sharing on Twitter, it's probably a good idea to not ask them that sort of question, or not engage with them on that level, because they've sort of put out the messages that's not something that they're on Twitter to talk about, or not something that they're interested in engaging with. And then, same if you find out a personal piece of information about someone, not sharing that on social media unless someone's explicitly told you that you can, or that they would like you to. Things like that. So I think kind of, keeping in mind what the other person's level of engagement is, and, trying to always respect that person and their privacy, and generally leaning towards the side of being confidential and not sharing information that you don't know if somebody wants you to share with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Erin. I think that's a really, really important answer, important thoughts for folks to keep in mind in terms of sharing other people's information. And in terms, I just want to sort of build on that to say, in terms of sharing your own information, this kind of rule of thumb goes for any other aspect of advocacy. You're not in a you don't have to share anything on Twitter that you don't feel comfortable sharing. This goes for any sort of, it's similar to, if you are getting up and giving a speech and you make a decision about those kinds of things that you're going to share and the things that you're not. If you do not want to disclose your HIV status on Twitter, you don't have to. Just to give an example sort of from the other side of the spectrum, some of y'all who are, whether you're on Twitter or not, you may know PWM USA member Maria Mejia. She's she's an amazing woman. She's an amazing advocate down in Miami, Florida, and her Twitter handle is Maria HIV Mejia. And she did that really, really deliberately because she got on Twitter to be an out woman living with HIV on Twitter. And I know that she has gotten, I don't know if she's on the call. Maria, are you there? I know that I've heard from her and talked to her about the fact that sometimes people feel have questions about that level of disclosure, that high level of disclosure that she takes as her own on Twitter, and she responds that that's her choice. and that's the level at which she wants to disclose her HIV status on Twitter, and that others can come on as, talking as openly or as about their HIV status or as openly about other aspects of their advocacy work or coming at it from different angles without having to disclose as they wish. It's really a personal choice. Twitter does not require that we share everything about our lives. So it's really up to you. But it's definitely important to think about, just as you would in any other way, in any other form that you're sharing information. And also just one other thing to remember is that, Twitter is definitely, it's public, so it's, it may feel like it's sort of confined just to you and the people that you're communicating with and your followers, but anything that you tweet can be shared and shared alike and shared, 100 times. And sometimes you want that to happen if it's an advocacy message that you want to spread. But anything that you want to keep to yourself, Twitter is not the place to share it because once it's tweeted out, it can be exciting to see the reach of a tweet, but it's not something that can be controlled. So definitely think about the kind of information that you're sharing, as you would if you were blogging or as you would if you were speaking out publicly in any way. Thanks for that question. We're way over time. I know I want to respect people's time. I do, but if folks really want to stick around for maybe one more question, if there is one, please feel free to enter it in the chat box. You can also hit *6 to come off mute so we can hear you and you can ask your question. Give another minute or so. People want to take a minute to maybe ask one more question. Thank you, Janet. I see that in the chat box. Great work. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great work in question asking and just being here and sharing the time and space. All right, hearing no more questions. Again, I'll just open up to you. Any final thoughts?
Gosh, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has been here. I noticed that we stayed at the same number of attendees, and so nobody left at the 7 o'clock hour, so much appreciated. And I really enjoyed this webinar, and I hope you all got a lot out of it. So thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to be able to share this information with you. I'm going to wait about 30 seconds and then I'm going to end the meeting, probably less than 30, about 15, because when I end the meeting, you're going to go straight to a survey. I just want everyone to fill it out. It helps us to be better trainers and to better share information with you if you can give your feedback on the trainings that we offer. So please fill out that survey. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. And just hold on for that survey. Take good care, everybody. Have a good night.